What is up, everybody? I am Hunter Orrell. Today we are joined with Richard, one of the co-founders of Manifold. He is a longtime NFT enthusiast, and I'm so happy to have him here today. He's definitely a big player in the community, and I'm excited to get to know more about him. How are you doing today, Richard?
Doing pretty good.
That's great. Richard, I feel like a lot of people know who you are, but they really don't know like exactly, they know about Manifold and all that. But my first big question to you is like, how did you get into the space? What prompted you to get into it?
Yeah, so like how it started was I started off as a collector, right?
Right.
So my co-founder, Eric, he sent me an NFT one day from Nifty Gateway, and he's like, check this out, I just bought this, right? It was a Slime Sunday NFT, and it was like $500. And I was like, you bought a JPEG? That was my first thought, right? You buy a JPEG for $500, right? And he's like, I just kind of like brushed it off, right? A week later, he sent me another one, another Slime Sunday piece. He bought it for like $800, right? And I was like, wow, it's pricey, right?
Right.
Like you can buy a lot of things for $800.
Right.
Get more, get something better than a JPEG, right? Like, what are you gonna do with a JPEG, right?
Right. At least be animated.
Yeah, right. No, yeah. So I was like, okay, whatever, right? So then a week later, he hits me up again. He's like, hey, I need your help to buy an NFT, right? Buy one of these NFTs, right? And he's like, you got a bunch of ETH? I'm like, yeah, I got a bunch of ETH, right? He's like, can you help me out? I'm like, sure, whatever, right? Then he's like, it's $4,000. I'm like, $4,000? Like, what is going on here, right? Why would you spend $4,000 on the JPEG, right? Like, it just made no sense to me. But he's one of my good friends, and just help him out, right? And he says, if you buy it, we can split it, you can sell it back to me, whatever, right? Just help me out. So we go on Nifty Gateway. I like load up my account with some ETH, right? We're like sitting there. And the whole thing is like on Nifty Gateway time at the time it was, click a button, right? Click a button right when a drop happens, and you can get it, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, so I loaded up my account, looked at the page, and was like, okay, we can do this. Easy enough, right? There's 14 101 Slime Sundays on that day.
Oh, wow.
Right. Yeah. So it's just like a very unique drop, right? And then I was looking at the page, right? And me being a programmer, I'm like, okay, what does this button do, right? It was like blacked out. So I just like enabled it, edited the HTML, enabled it, got to the buy page. I'm like, hey, I got to the buy page.
Oh, it was that? They had no like backend, like keeping control, like you just had to edit the HTML.
Yeah, so I edited the HTML, I go to the buy page, right? Then I got to the buy page. I'm like, okay, the buy button is blacked out again, right? So I'm like, what happens if I do it again, right? So I enabled the buy button, edit HTML, enabled the buy button. I hit the button, right? And it's like, it sent a web request to do the buy purchase, right? And the buy purchase was like, oh, failed. It's not available yet.
Oh, okay.
Right. So then I'm like, okay. I'm like, that's cool, right? But then I was like, hey, you can just take that request and put it in a loop. And so I did that. Okay. So I did that, which is just for like whatever, right? And then I put in the loop, and then I hit the buy button when it happened, right? And I was watching this like thing go. It's like sold out, right? I'm like, oh, that was fast, right? I'm like, I didn't do anything, right? I had no chance to respond to this at all, right?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, I get an email, ding, you have purchased Like Machine for $4,000, right? I'm like, cool.
Cool,
right?
Yeah.
Ah, cool. I'm like, but what is this thing, right? What did I just buy, right? And after that, I was like, so I talked to Eric, and Eric was like, why don't we try selling this thing? I'm like, sure, whatever, right? Because I had no idea what was going on. This is my first like 15 minutes.
So when you bought it, like you were just like, okay, I know there's an NFT for sale for $4,000. I'm just gonna buy it, and like I have no I'm gonna buy it. Like
Like, I had no idea what an NFT at the time. What the NFT was at the time. I just knew I was just helping my friend.
This is just like a blind like purchase.
Yeah, just like blind purchase, right? Yeah, helping a friend. Right? And so then we bought it, and I'm like, what do you want to do with this thing, right? He's like, why don't we try selling it, right? I'm like, sure, why not?
Right, let's make some money.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even know you can make money at the time, right?
Oh, so you're like, let's just try selling it.
It was his idea, right? Because I'm like, now that I own this thing, what can I do with it? And the only thing you can do at the time was, or the only thing you could do was you could hold it or you could sell it.
Right. And what year was this?
This is like 5 months ago.
5 months. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is like 5 months ago.
Right.
And so, so we put it. So I'm like, okay, let's try selling it, right? Because that's like the only action you could do. Right. So, I'm I'm like, what do you want to sell it for? He's like, I don't know, put like 15 grand, right? I'm like, 15 grand? That's like ridiculous. That's
Yeah, we
like,
just bought this for 4,000. Like nobody's
yeah,
gonna pay
like
15
why would some
grand
yeah,
a
right?
day later.
And he's like, bro, you're gonna be mad if this thing sells for 15 grand. I'm like, no. Like, why would I be, right? We spent 10 minutes buying this thing.
Right.
Why'd be mad, right? And so I listed it for $14,960. No, $14,960, yeah, $60. And just left it, right? And then we caught up because we haven't talked for like, it's been a few months. And then, we hung up. I went back to doing my whatever I was doing, right? And then like 20 minutes later, I get an email that says that sold for $15,000, right? And I was just like, my first thought was I wasn't happy. My first thought was I made a mistake.
Like I should have listed it higher.
Yeah, right. If it sold that fast, that means that there was a market for it, and then somebody wanted it, and somebody's willing to pay that price for it. Of like my first gut was just like, I made a mistake, right?
Like shit.
It's crazy. We just made $11,000.
Right.
Right. And my first instinct was I made a mistake, right? And because it had such a strong reaction to that, I was like, what is this NFT thing? Right. And from that point on, I just like started diving head in and trying to figure out what NFTs were.
Right.
And so like, my background is I've been in blockchain and developer for like almost a decade now, doing like Bitcoin applications and so on.
Right. Yeah.
Right,
You've been around forever. Like,
yeah,
I think for like listeners and like viewers, like you didn't just jump into like the crypto world 5 months ago. You've been around.
Yeah, I've been in crypto, right? I jumped into NFTs 5 months ago.
5 months. Yeah, exactly.
But crypto is, I've been through Bitcoin, every single crash of Bitcoin, right? I've been through, right? And, it doesn't faze me anymore. When Bitcoin crashes by like 20 to 50%, it's like, okay, that's Bitcoin doing
another
Bitcoin.
day in the office.
Yeah. So yeah, at that point now, but the interesting for me was that as soon as I, had that experience, I knew there was something different about NFTs, right? Because like, my whole, I guess, crypto career, it's always been about creating financial applications, right? How do you move money from A to B? How do you like, optimize, different things using the blockchain or like, like those sort of things, right? But this is the first time I was like, wow, there's an actual like application to blockchain and ownership where it makes sense, right? Because the whole promise of blockchain was always like, proof of digital ownership of some asset, right? And this is the first time it actually like truly clicked for me. I was like, okay, this is a thing.
Right. There's like a utility outside of just like money.
Yeah. Right. And so from there, it just I started collecting. Right. That's the natural thing to do. It's like, well, I made some money. How do I just make more money?
What did you start collecting? I'm curious where you went after Nifty Gateway.
Yeah, it was just Nifty Gateway. Just like literally just Nifty Gateway.
So you just stayed Nifty Gateway, didn't try to find like.
Well, I started exploring other things, but it was primarily Nifty Gateway because that's where all the action was happening.
Like 5 months ago, Nifty Gateway, and right now I don't think we see the same thing there. I haven't bought anything from them in a while. But like 5 months ago, I remember if you bought something in Nifty Gateway, you could double to 10x your money almost instantly on that day.
Yeah.
And that was wild back then.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, I just kept buying more Nifties, experimenting, buying things, selling things, and just trying to figure out like what really drove the market.
Right.
Like what truly drove the market and like, what needed to be done. Well, I know I wasn't thinking of it from like, building anything at the time. It's more just like having fun with my friends and just buying things and be like, hey, you ready for that drop tomorrow?
Right.
Let's, read a bit of research, figure out who the artists are, all those sort of things. And so, yeah, we were just having fun as collectors.
Yeah, that's so cool. Right. And then I guess you slowly made that journey from collector to a builder. I mean, you really did go from purely just like exploring and buying to now being a big builder in the community and like helping these people that you were buying from put their artwork and NFTs out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like how that happened was so my group, right, we ended up buying Mad Dog Jones' block heater, right? At the time, it was one of the largest transactions. It was like $66,000.
Right.
And it was his collaboration with deadmau5, and we're like, wow, we just like loved it, right? We're like, there's something here. There's something about Mad Dog that we just really loved. We loved the art piece. And one of my friends was like, yeah, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go for, the win, win the auction piece. Right. And so he bid it up, right? It went to $66,000 and he won it, right? Which at the time that was like probably one of the highest sales because, outside of people.
Right.
And then that's how we got connected to Mad Dog, right? And then we started talking to Mad Dog, and us being programmers and game designers and blockchain developers, we're like, hey, Mad Dog was really, grateful that we bought his piece for one, but then on top of that too, we're like, hey, did you know that you could do all this like cool stuff with this, the blockchain and this NFT art, right? And so we just started like deep diving with him, and he's like, whoa, I didn't know that, right? And as we told him some of these concepts, we were like, hey, did you know you could burn an NFT? He's like, burn an NFT? What does that even mean?
Right.
Right. And to that of it, it's just destroying an NFT, like sending it to the dead address so that it doesn't exist anymore, or it's not ownable. Right. And so he's like, yeah, I really want to explore that concept. Right. And so what we did is that we did our first collaboration with him, which was the crash and burn drop.
The crash and burn drop. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, most people don't know that we were involved with that, but we did a lot of planning for that one. Right. So like, what we did is that we took all the data from Nifty Gateway related to all his pieces, figured out what the economy for his piece was, what the trajectory for each of his thoughts and ideas were. Because the idea was that you would take thoughts and ideas, you would burn 5 of them, and get a unique 101 for it. Yeah, and then we looked at every single collector that had thoughts and ideas and determined if they were a buyer, a seller, or a holder, right? Based on how much, based on their previous trajectories or activity on the site and how much money they spent. And then from there, we designed an economy around that to figure out, what is the optimal, price or optimal like burn rate that would create enough pressure on the system that would cause the prices of his other artwork and thoughts of idea to go upwards.
That's fascinating.
Right. And so we took a very data-driven approach to like, to that burn mechanic. Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah. And so we did that. Thoughts and ideas started off at $1,000. And by the end of week 2, they were selling for $150,000. Right. Just because we created that, that right pressure cooker economy. Right. And we designed it from the very start of like, how do we really increase scarcity of a piece to increase value of the artwork?
Do you think, I mean, kind of to jump off of that, like, do you think scarcity right now is something that we don't see enough of? I think abundancy, especially with like these 10,000 mint projects and, the volume of projects coming out. Do you think scarcity is undervalued right now?
Well, I think it depends what it is, right? So, I truly believe in scarcity. Like one of the big problems I see right now is that, the idea of that when I make an NFT, as a creator, if I make an NFT, I'm effectively creating value for it or that NFT, right? So let's say I create an NFT and I sell it to you for 1 Ethereum, right?
Right.
That means that we now have 2 Ethereum worth of value, right? Because the NFT is worth 1 Ethereum, right? And the Ethereum is by default worth 1 Ethereum.
I see what you're thinking there.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, we've actually increased the value creation in the space by 1 Ethereum by me creating and selling that NFT. Right. And so unless, additional capital comes into the marketplace to offset that, right? The more NFTs you create, the more you dilute the whole entire NFT space as a whole.
Gotcha.
Right. And so, it's just like economics, right? And so, one of the things about NFTs is that they're really easy to make. It's really easy to make an NFT because all it is just a digital signature.
Right.
Right. If you think about the traditional art world, how many art pieces does an artist create in a year?
Right? A dozen, maybe.
A dozen, right? Even not even that for some of the more prolific ones, right?
Right.
They could be like 1 art piece every like 6 months.
Right.
And so it's that scarcity, which is why some of these artworks command such high prices.
That's a good way of thinking about it and putting it. And certainly, it's certainly something that I think has been on my mind and a lot of other people's minds as we see, just sheer volume in the marketplace right now. And I don't know, that I think it's an interesting and different thought process than I think a lot of people have. But it is good that we're seeing that value creation within the ecosystem.
Yeah. Like I do think there is value creation from art. Art itself does have intrinsic value, right? It just depends on the method of transfer of that value, right, and how it's recognized.
Right. Very true. I guess hopping back to discussion about, Nifty and doing the Mad Dog, launch, where in that process of going from just buying and collecting, exploring, did you make that switch to I'm going to be a creator in this space? Was it just talking to him? Or was there like a moment or something that made you realize like, okay, I don't want to just buy anymore?
Yeah, well, so I guess from the moment I started buying, right, is I started building tools. Like I just started building tools right away, right? And that was to help me understand the space better,
Right.
right? And so like, one of the things that, I created was just a huge database of every single NFT, right? And so I have a database of all the NFTs and all the sales history of everything that's gone on. So I can actually look at trends and, all those sort of things that happened as a collector, right?
Right.
And so, that was one of the first things I built, and that, that we use that data to help Mad Dog with the burn drop, right? But, I wouldn't say I made a switch from a collector to a builder, but because I've always been building, just like building is always my default, right? But the collecting part was more about learning about what was going on in the space.
Gotcha.
Right. And, the way I see it is that, in order to be a good builder, you have to understand the product you're building, right? And so, a lot of people come in this space and be like, I want to build a product, but they actually don't know the right audience for the product.
You just tweeted this yesterday, like too many people come into the space and they haven't put in like the work and touched and felt and understand what they're doing. They just want to be consultants or,
So really the early tools I built were just for myself, right? Like, just for me to understand, what is actually going on in the space. These are the things I wanted, right? And so some of the earlier projects I've created that, it just weren't released. I have the whole database of all the NFTs. I created a gallery site, right, for myself, just because I had these like high value NFTs, but there's no way to show it off, right? It's kind of like Showtime in a certain sense, right? But yeah, there's no way to show it off, right? So I created this site for just let me show off my NFTs. That ended up being more useful to creators, because what ended up happening was that a lot of the creators have no idea about their sales data, right?
Oh, really? I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So, on Nifty Gateway, when you sell a piece as a creator, you just get an email, right? Same thing. Most of these places are just like email notifications of, you sold a piece, right? But there's no way to tie it all together.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, that gallery site ended up being more useful as a creator, like for creators to figure out their sales stats.
Interesting.
Right. Using some of the data. Right. And yeah, that just came out of a direct need of, one day, I guess Fuckrender was like, my accountant wants to know how many things I've sold. Like, I don't have that data, right? It's just a bunch of emails, right? So like, we just pulled the data, sent him a spreadsheet and gave it to his accountant. And then, yeah, that's, you can now have that data and figure out, how much money he's actually made and sold and lost in NFTs.
Wow.
Same sort of thing goes as a collector too, right? Like, do you have any idea how much money you spent on NFTs?
Me, ballpark. I don't think it's very accurate though.
Yeah.
I mean, I have, the ongoing spreadsheet and I try to keep track of transactions, but I don't think it's accurate enough right now to where I could tell an accountant, hey, this is to the dollar, what I've spent, gains, losses, all that.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's actually one of the problems in the space, right? And so, having that data, I actually have a dashboard that tells me here's how much my NFTs are worth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so those are just some of the projects I have just internally that have helped inform my viewpoint on the NFT space and what needs to be built.
Is that stuff that would ever become public, or is that just internal for now?
It's internal for now. Like, we want to make it public, but it's just a matter of bandwidth.
Right. You have a lot going on.
We have a lot going on. Right. So just figuring out what is the, what are the things we want to champion right now, right? So like Manifold is only 3 people. Yeah, 5 as of last week.
But, yeah, you guys added 2 more.
Yeah, we just added 2 more people to our crew, right? But we were literally just 3 people up until last week.
Right. And you guys have been onboarding. It seems like more and more people that I talk to are like, oh, I'm using, Manifold for my smart contract deployment. I've talked to Jake a lot. He's, very pro Manifold and always telling people I talk to like, oh yeah, like I told this guy to talk to Richard and whatnot.
Yeah.
What is your strategy for how you guys are handling like the onboarding and like differentiation from other smart contract deployment, companies.
Yeah. Okay. So like, how our smart contract came out to be is that, we did the Mad Dog Jones replicator, right? And so that was, one of our, I guess, flagship projects at the time, right? But we saw a big problem at the end of that was that, Mad Dog wanted to do another project,
Right.
right? And then we had to deploy another contract for that. And we're like, well, it doesn't make sense that, every single time somebody wants to check that a work is authentic or belonging to an artist themselves, that they have to deploy another contract. Right. So like, for example, on Nifty Gateway, Mad Dog has like 4 contracts.
Right.
Right. And so whenever you want to check if a piece on OpenSea or at some other platform is authentically Mad Dog's, you have to get the contract address, get the token ID, verify it on OpenSea, then go to like Etherscan and be like, is this the right contract address and token?
Right.
Who owns it? Right. And then you got to go to Nifty Gateway and be like, okay, is this actually,
It's more of a puzzle than it should be.
Yeah, right. So you got to do like 3 or 4 verifications, right? And especially if you're doing like a large transaction, then involving like tens of thousands of dollars, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, you kind of want to make sure that stuff is right.
Like
right?
That's the most important thing in the whole
right.
consideration.
And so yeah, we were like, well, what's going to happen is that if we keep doing projects like this, there's just going to be a proliferation of smart contracts that every artist is going to have. And then, there's 2 ways to do it. You can have a central registry that says this contract is authentic, which is kind of OpenSea, right? But you still have to do that whole like 3-step verification.
Right.
Right. Or, they can have one source of truth that this contract is, belongs to the artist. As a buyer, as a collector, you just have to go to that contract and check that contract is authentically, Mad Dog's or the artist, right? And just trust that contract, right?
Right.
And then you can have verification on that contract from the artist himself that says, yes, this is my contract. Right. And so, once we realized that, we're like, okay, we need to deploy more contracts. But then the problem is a lot of the other minting contracts out there, all they allow you to do is just tokenized artwork. Right. So what that means is that you can have your NFT, you can attach artwork to it, which would be an image or a video. Right. And that's kind of it. Right.
Right.
So like, when I think about what an NFT is in its entirety, it's a new medium. Right.
It is.
That medium encompasses the contract, the token, the artwork, and ownership. Right. And so a lot of these contracts out there, they only let you like do one thing, which is tokenize artwork. Right. They actually don't let you have access to the medium of the smart contract.
Right. It seems very almost restrictive and almost like counter. Like it's counter what blockchain is supposed to be and NFTs are supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, I would say counter, right? It's these platforms have like their track, right? So every single platform has, we will let you attach a token to an image or a video, and that's it.
Right.
Like the replicator is really interesting because it actually uses the medium completely, because you have the smart contract which uses the logic to do the replications.
Right.
Ownership matters in that case because owning one of the replicators lets you get a future replicator. Right. The contract in that case was deployed by Mad Dog himself, right? Owned by Mad Dog himself, right? The initial token was generated by Mad Dog, right? And also the artwork is part of the contract itself too, right? Because it's it's the replicator is a picture of a photocopier, and it pretty much just makes copies of itself, which is exactly what the tokens are. Right. So that it's a whole medium. It uses NFT as a medium exactly in its capacity.
Right. And I think I guess my comment on being counter is that, to me, I think that having that smart contract capability is so important, at least to me. And I think the future, especially going forward, we'll see more artists put emphasis on the utility and the actions and the abilities that the smart contract allows them to use.
Yeah, and so the key thing that we've built into our contracts, besides just being a minting contract, right? We've created an application plugin framework, right? What that lets you do is that you can create another smart contract that plugs into your base minting contract, that lets you run different logic and all the other stuff, all the creative parts of the NFT, right? So for example, like with Mad Dog's new replicator contract or new manifold creator contract, if you want to do a project like Replicator, we would just create a Replicator smart contract, plug that into his Mad Dog Jones contract, and then you could have that Replicator experience, but have everything still have one source of truth, which would be his contract.
That's so cool. Wow. I don't think anybody else is doing it like that right now, are they?
Not that I know of, right? Not from this point of view, right?
Right.
So a lot of times people are just doing custom contracts that just have the logic encapsulated in the contract itself.
Right.
Right. And so, our unique thing is that we've deferred the logic of the NFT to another contract, right? The base minting contract that we provide is still a minting contract. So you can do, everything else that any other minting contract can do, but you just have that flexibility to do more unique things.
So I guess on top of that conversation, where do you see NFTs exploring the smart contract utility next? Like, where do you think we're going?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is that a lot of artists are now realizing that, there's technology here, right? So, NFTs are more than just the artwork itself, right? And, the thing that I sort of see, right, that I sort of think is coming up right now is once artists are going to realize that NFTs actually do have additional capabilities, right? And the other thing too is that there's functionality that you can make in the NFTs that are just beyond artwork itself, right? And so the way that we kind of think about things is that one of our backgrounds is that we're game designers, right? And so all we're kind of doing right now is just taking some of these game mechanics and just porting them over to NFTs. Like for example, the burn mechanic, that's a very common game design pattern, right?
Right.
You submit one thing and get another item back, right?
What are other mechanics you're exploring or want to implement?
Yeah. So the other thing too is if you think about PAX Ash project, right?
Right.
That's just the game economy in itself, right? You have a currency that has some usefulness, right? And it creates an economy, right? You can do a lot of things with NFTs, right? So when I think about what an NFT is, right, or what the blockchain and smart contract is, the smart contract is literally just a data store that stores state, right? And so other ideas you can do is you could have NFTs follow each other, for example. You could have NFTs combine and be able to break themselves up. Right? You could have NFTs that actually affect other NFTs in that same contract.
Right.
For example, right, I could see here's an NFT. Every time somebody else transfers it, this NFT gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Right. So the more transfers you have,
we haven't seen. I don't think we've seen a lot of that. I think
no, because there's not many people
there's not many people thinking in that, I guess, way.
Yeah. And then you can think of it as NFT games, right? Like you'd have the whole game be run by a smart contract, and NFTs are just your access point into these games.
Right.
Right. And on top of that too, once you start kind of merging in some DeFi mechanics and stuff like that, then you create different economies. Right. And so the possibilities are really not explored yet from the point of view of what the actual technology can do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, we're so early.
Yeah. Then on the collectible side of things, it's I think that there's a lot of projects out there who are just trying to do generative collectibles. The standard 10,000 mint drop, right? But the funny thing is they're all just using the Bored Apes contract for that.
It's crazy. It's literally just that contract reused.
Yep, it's literally they're taking that contract, just changing a few things on the contract, redeploying it with new artwork, and they're not really innovating it on collectibles or NFTs medium, right? But the thing is everybody's just aping into them because they're like, oh, I can make money off this, right?
Right.
And so I think that it reminds me a little bit of the ICO days, and I guess the earlier Nifty crash or NFT crash.
Yep.
Right. So the mindset is that if somebody tells you should just buy something because you can make money, that means that it's about to crash.
Yeah.
It's just literally about to crash, right? I remember back in the ICO days, people were just buying like shit coins just because they would just go up, right?
We know it's going to go up, buy it, sell it, make
right?
Money.
And that was actually true with Nifties a few months ago, right? Everyone just buy any Nifty, it will go up.
Exactly.
Right. And so we're seeing the exact same thing with the avatars right now, because every single project is just selling out. You can get in, you can pump it, you can dump it, and then and then so on, right? And so I
Right.
think that's going to correct itself pretty soon, right? And to me, we're going to have to see the next phase of innovation, right? And so
What do you think the next phase is?
well, I think like more game mechanics, right?
Right.
Because right now the avatars are pretty much just lotteries. Like that's the game mechanic. They're lottery tickets.
It is a lot. It is a casino that is open 24/7, and it just takes a click of a button.
Yeah, but once you have NFTs that actually have utility, right? Having this NFT gets you access to the larger game, right? Maybe you could have a game where imagine an avatar collectible where there's like 3 tribes or something like that, right? And these tribes can all fight each other in some sense to make their traits more valuable, right?
Interesting.
That's totally possible using the technology, right? And that's actually utility built into the NFT itself while still being a collectible avatar. But it actually makes people work for to increase the value of the economy.
Do you see anybody? I mean, obviously, Bored Ape Yacht Club has kind of started off that trend. Do you see any projects right now that you think are thinking in that mentality? Maybe not like short term, like right now, but it's planned. Do you think they have the ability to execute on top of that plan?
I think the only interesting one I've seen so far is the universe project, the polymorphs.
Yes,
Right.
polymorphs.
So that was like, I would say that was interesting, right? I have some criticism about the art, but I think the concept was really interesting.
I think a lot of other people do.
Yeah, but at the same time too, it's like that I appreciate how they tried something new, right? And that actually does they tried something new that and I think that's what you have to do, right? If you want to innovate, there's going to be a lot of successes, but there's also going to be a lot of failures, right?
Right.
And I think failure is one of the big things. Is that as the more you fail, the more you learn, right? That's how you can come out better, right? And so I think that team has they have a lot of good people there who are trying to do things right, and it's just going to be more iterations of different projects around that scope.
Right. Yeah. Tyler is a rock star. I like him, and I like that they broke the model for what these projects are. Like nothing else is even comparable to it. I know a lot of people did say like Ethylines with like roles and the wearables and being able to change, but polymorph certainly does seem like it is a completely different take on how to approach an NFT. And I certainly think is you being a smart art contract developer, like I think we'll see stuff come out that redefines how we approach like what is art, what is an NFT, what does it look like, that makes us go, wow, never thought of that, but it's possible.
We're still really, really early in my opinion, right? Like the technology the art has not caught up to the technology, which is like my big thing. Right. And there's just not many artists who have access to, I guess, like technical teams to actually execute, or okay, I would say that actually understand the medium of technology in art. Right. So a lot of these artists are coming from the art side of things, right? But there's no one actually teaching them, here's what an NFT can do, and here's how you can utilize it, and so that you can actually have different ideas that utilizes the medium.
Right. What would you say to somebody who's trying to get started in this space, whether they're like an artist or like where you were, like they bought some Nifty, they've bought some stuff on OpenSea, they've minted, but they're like, okay, I want to do my own project. What would you say, like learning A to Z to launch off, the best way to do that is?
Yeah. So I think the core thing is you have to understand the fundamentals first. Right. Like I think that's true of anything. For like for myself, right? Whenever I try to learn something, it's always going down to like what is the fundamental thing that drives these things or the technology behind it, right? And in the smart contract space, or in the NFT space, it's the smart contract, right? So if you want to understand what an NFT is, start with the NFT spec, right? Which is the ERC 721 spec, right? Like why does this exist and what does it do?
Right.
Right. From there, what you want to do after that is go back down to, actually trying to implement that spec, right? And so, there's a lot of open source projects out there I guess like Open Zeppelin would probably be the best use case, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So it's just, what you can do in Open Zeppelin is just literally take one of their NFT ERC 721 specs, like contracts, and just deploy it, right? As soon as you deploy it, you now have your own contract. It's just
Right.
the base NFT contract, and then play with it, right? You don't have to code it, you don't have to change anything from it, but like try minting an actual piece on that contract by itself.
Right.
Right. At that point now you'll understand, okay, well, what is minting, right? So like a lot of people think that, when I own an NFT and it's in my wallet, that's like, well, that NFT actually isn't in your wallet. You don't own an NFT, right? What you own are the keys, the private keys, which tells which you can then go to the contract and say, hey, I own these private keys. And the contract says, oh, the owner of this piece is the owner of these private keys.
Right. It's
Right.
not physically in there.
Yeah.
It's just almost like a verification process.
Yeah. So yeah, your keys are not your wallet. It does not mean you own something. It's your wallet. It says that you have access to a smart contract that owns
Exactly.
that. No, it not even owns it. The smart contract is just literally just a ledger that says there's a token that is owned by some address.
And then verifies that.
Yeah. And verifies that. Yeah. And so yeah, so understanding what that is, right? Because that's at its core what an NFT is fundamentally. Right. Once you understand that, then you can start thinking, well, okay, well, what can I build on top of that?
Mm-hmm.
Right. From the technology point of view, right? And I think that's where the big disconnect is that there hasn't been that education piece of, what is the smart contract's role in the artwork itself?
Right.
A lot of these platforms have just said, hey, give us your artwork and we'll mint it for you.
Right.
Right. They abstract that whole entire process away. Like on Nifty Gateway, when you want to, when an artist mints something, they submit their artwork to their producer, right? And Nifty Gateway just like takes away every single aspect of the NFT itself, except for they black box that whole process.
Right. The artist just does the art and then magically it's mintable.
Yep.
And they don't have any interaction or there's no creative process on the smart contract side.
Yep.
Which, like you said, kind of black boxes it and takes away a little bit.
Yeah. And so like it's first learning what the spec is, right, for NFTs, and then going down to like deploying your own contract, and then even trying to like change things in code. Right. I think that if you do that, you'll get a better understanding of what NFTs are as a medium.
Right.
Right. And as a creator, if you're truly interested in the space, I think that will probably give you like the biggest advantage going forward.
Right. So if you're a creator, focus on learning how to interact with ERC 721, playing with it, deploy your own, changing code. I mean, that's primarily where you got to focus right now.
Yeah. It's like, if you think that NFT is a medium, right? It's like, this is your paintbrush, why?
I like that analogy.
Right. When I hear about, when I hear about all these artists, that what they'll do is they'll spend like, one a day doing a one a day thing, right? It's they do it to learn the tools that they're playing with, right? Their canvas, right? I know Fuckrender used to do a one a day, right? So he used to do every single day. He'd just go create an artwork using the tools, just so he could learn the tools and get really good at it, right? And now he can just like create artwork really fast, right? I've seen him work. He's just fast because he doesn't have to think about what he wants to do. It's just translating his idea in his head to the computer screen, right? Because he knows the tools.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And the same thing about NFTs is like, you have to know what your toolkit is.
Right. That's interesting. Very interesting. So for a new artist, maybe who only wants to focus on the creative side and they don't want to touch, I guess, the contract side, what would your advice be for those people? Because obviously, I think some listeners here aren't, program background based like you and me, and they're more on the art side and they're trying to figure out, okay, well, I can do Photoshop really well. I can do Illustrator well. I can do photography. How do I jump into this space and work well? Do they go to somebody like you, or do they try to partner with somebody? What would your suggestion to them be?
My suggestion for them would be more experiment, right? And so like figure out what your art represents, right? And then, I would say start off by just experimenting. Like, I think a lot of people give like an OpenSea shared contract a lot of like flack just because it's a shared contract. But I think that that's a great price to start, right? It's very low barrier to entry. It will help you create an NFT. It'll help you get into space, right? And then it'll help you experiment, right? I think the big thing is that when you first start off, you just have to experiment.
Right.
Like everyone always said, everyone always looks at these artists and be like, well, they're huge successes, right? But they're not an overnight success. They spent, a decade, right? Like Misha and Mad Dog and Fred and Victor, right? For sure, Sarah. They're like, yeah, we were like starving artists a year ago, right? But they just kept pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing, right? Then Ellison and NFTs came along, and then it just made them seem like an overnight success. But these guys have been working for like a decade.
Yeah, they're just grinding.
They're just grinding, right? They're literally just grinding.
And I think that's something that probably is missing from the marketplace now, because things are it's so easy to make money if you just put stuff out. I think we'll see a lot of those people that are just grinding and putting stuff out who haven't been picked up be successful in the long run, because it's noisy right now, in my opinion.
And then the second part to that is just building community, right? So like if you're a brand new person in the community, how do you find your first collector, right? How do you get your first collector bought into what your vision is, right? From my point of view as a collector, one of the hard parts is that if I see a brand new artist that's like coming on the scene, right? I have to decide if I want to support them, right? And there's a lot of decision making that goes into whether you collect something, right? So first is like, am I collecting this for investment purposes? Am I trying to support the artist? Do I just like the art? Right. But one of the things that I always look for is do I think this artist is going to stick around? Can I interact with this artist later on, right? If they sell one piece and just leave and I never talk to them again, then what I'm stuck holding their artwork, which is that's why if it's a cool piece of artwork, I don't mind.
Right.
But in some of the cases, I actually want to develop a relationship with the artist to be like, hey, how can I help you? How can we like make this space better? How can we like inspire other people?
Right.
That's to me, that's part of the fun of collecting, is just being able to have that connection with the artist and the creators. Every time I buy an artwork, I always reach out to the artist and say like, thank you. And just, how can I help?
That's so cool. Yeah. And I think you definitely learned that from Mad Dog, like buying a piece and then kind of continuing that narrative of, okay, I support you, but what else are you doing? I'm enjoying what you're doing. How can we, help you is something that not a lot of people I think do. I think a lot of people just buy and they're like, okay, I'm going to make money, or I like the art, but that narrative isn't there, which is cool to see that from you guys. What do you go ahead.
Yeah. And on top of that too, it's like, once you start talking to these creative people, right, you just get more ideas, right? And so like, exactly what I was gonna ask. Like a lot of these things has just been like me talking to the artist and be like, yo, this would be cool, right? And we just start riffing on ideas. I'm like, okay, that becomes a project then, right?
Right. So how, I guess, with those ideas, do you see what Manifold is doing going like new directions that you never expected right now?
So like, the interesting thing is that Manifold was never supposed to be a company, right?
Oh, so really? So it was like an accident almost?
Well, not really an accident. It was like when we first started, okay, I never got into the NFT space saying, I'm going to build a company. Like that was just not one of my thoughts, right? My thought was like, this is cool, right? I want to learn more about the space. I want to collect some cool art. I want to, we started connecting with cool artists and doing cool projects, right? But, we never had the intention of like, hey, we're going to build a company.
Right.
That was not anywhere on a list of priorities, right? It wasn't until we actually had a vision for what a company could be that we're like, okay, this makes sense to build a company now.
Right.
Right. So, like we had this burning, as we started building things and we started seeing the problems in the space that all these like creators were having, then we're like, oh man, this is a huge problem, right? Like someone needs to solve this, right?
Right.
And that's the point where we're like, okay, this makes actually sense to build a company right now, because we actually have something that we truly can contribute to the space that actually makes sense.
Yeah, you saw the needs and the pains and
right,
a solution.
Yeah, right. And then we were kind of doing these things on the side for some of the artists we were working with. Like we were just helping out. Like we haven't accepted payment for like almost everything we've done.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we're just like learning, right? Uh, and so yeah, from that point, we're like, okay, well, we saw this problem now that all these artists are having, right? Which is issues with provenance and tool sets and all that kind of stuff, right? And the thing is, like, we had half the stuff already kind of made just for my own like playing around. And so at that point now, we're like, okay, so what is the vision for the company? Well, we want to help creators become their own platforms, right?
Right.
That's part of it, right? So we saw, a lot of artists would come to me like, well, where do I drop, right? And there's really no good answers for some of that question right now,
Right.
right? And the most logical solution was like, well, you should just drop on your own site.
Do you think more and more people are going to go that route in the long run? Or do you think people are going to go okay, just communal contract and we're going to get artwork out there? I mean,
Yeah.
the big one that's been on my mind is looking at NIL being approved, which is the name, image, likeness from the NCAA, where now college players can go out and monetize their names. And with them coming into the space, there's been a large kind of conversation between, do you see them do something like Top Shot where everybody's kind of on the same single project, or do they go okay, there's an athletes only where you can do your own projects but customized, or do I just go do my own thing on my own contract individually away and have full control over it?
Yeah. Well, I think that depends on, what kind of resources you have, how much dedication you want to put to the space, what's your vision for the space, right?
Right.
Like, the way we see it is we're just trying to provide tools in a decentralized manner, right? And so what I mean by that is that, the way I think about everything that we've done in the space so far is that we're trying to create a decentralized, okay, the way I see it right now is that if Manifold and myself and my co-founders and everyone in Manifold disappeared tomorrow, right? Or, in the future, we
Right.
want whatever we've created to be able to be usable.
Right. It still lives
Right.
on.
It still
It's
lives
fully
on, right?
decentralized.
Fully decentralized, right? So that's the lens we put through all of our projects that we work on, right? And so like for the artwork we say is like, well, if I disappeared, would this artwork still exist? Yes. Right. If we disappeared, would this contract still exist? Yes. Is the contract still usable? Yes. Right. And so yeah, we're really trying to remove ourselves from that equation to create a decentralized and permanent like ecosystem.
Very cool.
So
Very cool.
that's the lens we put whenever we work on a project.
I love that. It's just one of those things that I think I've started to value more since I got into the space, at the end of 2020. And as I start to look at the future, that's the sort of stuff that like gets me excited to see, people creating and having that mentality beyond the stuff that I was buying and looking at in the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's so cool. I wanted to talk more. I know we've been going for like 50 minutes and this was like an hour talk. I wanted to talk more about like what projects you've been buying and like what you find really interesting right now. Are there any like that you wanted to talk about?
Not really. I've just been buying everything.
Right.
It's funny. I'm just part of one of my friends. He created. I brought him in NFTs, and then he started buying things. And he created his own like Discord group of just like his friends. I guess me too, right? And he has a list of like all the drops happening for every single like project, right? So I just like go in every day. I'm like, I just ask, okay, what do I need to buy today, right? And they're like, buy this, this, and this, right? I'm like, okay. I just literally just go and buy it and just like walk away.
Do you flip it all, or are you just buying like okay?
I flip sometimes, right? So like sometimes I have like buyer's remorse. I'm like, oh, that sucks. So I'll just try to flip it right away.
Right.
But in general, okay, so part of me for buying is it's not so much about trying to like make the money. It's trying to understand the culture around it, and what is actually going on in this space.
Right.
Right. So to me, buying is always about learning.
Do you always look at a Discord group before you buy, or are you just like, hey, I'm looking at the project. I'm not going to look at like what the community is doing as much.
No, there's been times where my friend is just like, hey, you buying? I'm like, no, should I be? And he's like, yes. I'm like, okay, I'll buy. Like that, no research into whatever it is. Just
What was the most regrettable purchase you made?
What was it? Most regrettable purchases? I don't really regret any purchases. I don't let me check my wallet.
I think there's I think we all have that one that's like,
Yeah, no,
oh,
I've lost a ton of money on like some projects just because. I bought those degens yesterday. Apparently,
oh.
those didn't do well.
No, they did not. No, I looked at the floor this morning. It's like, yeah, that did not age well.
I heard they were supposed to like buy back stuff or something like that, but I don't know.
We'll see. We'll see.
What do I have in my wallet? I got some bananas. I got some bowls. I guess bowls did okay. I got chubbies.
Ooh, that one probably you regret a little bit.
Nah, yeah, whatever. I got Slacker Ducks. I got Misfits. I got Slum Doge Billionaires. I
Wow.
got
Yeah. So you buy pretty much.
Craniums.
You buy a lot.
I got Crypto Poops. I got those reverse punks.
The reverse punks. Yeah.
Yeah, I got bonsai trees. I got Bored Ape dogs. I got apes.
What is your favorite piece right now that you own? I mean, I should know, like, obviously you're part of 3D gang, rocking the 3D glasses punk.
A favorite piece I own. Oh man, that's interesting. I would say I would say it's a Slime Sunday piece I own.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a Slime Sunday piece. It's a 1-on-1. It was kind of like one of my first early purchases.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I'll tweet it to you. This one here. This one. Here. This guy here. It's Escalosia, California.
Oh, that's sick. Yeah, I'll throw that up in the video. I mean, that's such a cool video.
Yeah, that's probably one of my first pieces that I really enjoy. This was like when Slime Sunday was like kind of like, he was kind of a big name, but not quite, the big name.
Right.
Right. And so I bought this piece for like 7 ETH, which was, I think at the time, like $12,000.
Wow.
So
that's so cool. That is great.
Yeah.
We got about like 5 minutes left here. I usually wrap up these interviews with like 5 questions I call the fungible 5.
Sure.
Just chat through some stuff that we might have talked about, but hopefully they kind of wrap up the interview and give some people more insight into who you are. I've asked and touched on this a little bit throughout our talk, but what has been your favorite project in the space recently? I guess like within the last week that you've seen, or if there are any.
Favorite project in the last week? I'm not sure. Not in the last week. Nothing comes to mind in the last week.
Like further out. I know. I think I would have trouble with that question as well. I don't think there's been anything that I've like absolutely lost my mind over.
I thought the pickle project was actually really, really fun.
I thought that was really different, which is why I think I felt different.
Yeah, it's actually funny because I checked my DMs and the creator, I think his name is Coleman.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. He actually messaged me and asked if we wanted to work on the project. And it's funny, I saw his initial tweet. I actually saw the initial tweet when he first like had the idea. I was like, oh, that's pretty ingenious, right? I'm like, someone's gonna do this.
Right.
And then, my DMs just got overflowed, right? And I looking back one day, I'm like, oh, you messaged me and asked me if I wanted to work on this.
Would you have done it?
I would have done that. Yeah, I would have done that. I actually enjoyed yeah. But the project was a success anyways. So I enjoyed that piece, that one.
Yeah, I enjoyed that as well. But that's a good point. Also, like Twitter DMs are probably the most impossible thing to like keep track of. They definitely need a better tool for doing that. I definitely miss some important stuff that goes in there.
It's actually funny because one of my very first jobs was I worked at a company called Hootsuite.
Okay.
Right. So Hootsuite they do enterprise Twitter management for social media teams.
Okay.
Right. And so I was actually their 5th employee there, and I built their iPhone and iPad and APIs there. And so I actually have access to like a enterprise Twitter social media management tool because I have an employee plan.
Right.
Yeah, but I'm still using just the regular Twitter.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It does have like inboxes and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, but
that's so cool. Yeah, we should touch more on like, I guess your like background. Like obviously you're a programmer. You've worked at like big tech companies or like tech companies. You've always been a technical person, right?
Yep.
Like just growing up.
Always. Yep. Always. I started programming when I was 13. So.
Oh, that's so cool.
like
So you like
25.
programming, found Bitcoin, what is cryptocurrency? And then 5 months ago, stumbled across NFTs. And then here you are today working with, some of the biggest artists in the world.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I never thought, I wasn't really doing much last year. Like I was literally just playing video games all day last year. But yeah, as soon as I found NFTs, I'm like, wow, this is like crazy, right? And yeah, just like it's literally all I think about all day now, right? It's like I wake up, NFTs. I'm either buying NFTs, I'm like researching market, building projects, talking to artists. It's just my life right now. Just like NFTs.
It's like a drug. It's like a drug. It's scary.
Mhm.
I'll go through the rest of these
Yeah.
questions here. What was the last item you added to your wallet?
Last time I was wallet, what was it? It was the degens.
The degens. Okay.
Degens.
Did you get anything that you liked?
No, they're all terrible.
That's hilarious. Well,
Yeah, I got 5 of them.
not a single one you liked.
No, that's a good one I like.
Are you gonna try flip them? Get rid of them?
Sure. Maybe. I don't know.
Just hold them. Number 3, who is a must follow on Twitter or worth studying on Twitter right now?
Must follow on Twitter. Who do I think is a must follow on Twitter? So many must follows on Twitter.
There's a lot.
I'm gonna say, I guess like the 2 people who come to mind right now, right? One of them is what's his Twitter name? It's Andy of Fractional Art.
Yeah, Andy.
Right? So he's a really good builder. Really excited to see what's going to come out from Fractional, right? And the other one is Alex of NFTX.
Gosman or
Yeah,
Gauze?
Alex, yeah, who just sold the zombie.
Yeah.
Yesterday. But yeah, I really appreciate builders in the space. Just because these are the people who are building the pipelines for everyone going forward.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's definitely 2 people that are building.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious to see what happens with NFTX. Fractional, I absolutely love. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very, very pro fractional person. So I'm excited to see what they do. Number 4, what is the biggest lesson you've learned / wish you knew when you started 5 months ago?
Biggest lesson I knew I started 5 months ago.
I know it's another hard one.
Probably when to sell.
I think a lot of people wish they knew that. Like, do you think you have it down to like an art though, or like you understand when to know when to sell?
No, it's actually funny because I'm not a seller. I'm like literally just a holder.
Right.
Right. So I actually tried doing some like flipping earlier. Right. So I buy a bunch of stuff, try to flip it right away.
Right.
But then to me, it was more about like it just wasn't worth the time investment. Right. Like my time is just spent so much more building things. Right. And really it's like, the reason why I was flipping was just I was actually trying to figure out what a tool might be to actually like give you sell indicators of when to sell.
Right.
Right. And so like, that was more of what I was trying to like do that for. Right. Just to like figure out what tools need to be built for a seller.
Right.
Right.
That's so cool. But then you ended up being a creator instead of a seller.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say more of a builder rather than a creator though. Just
right. That's so cool. Number 5, where do you see the NFT space in 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. So in 3 to 5 years, I see it just kind of being the default digital commerce of everything. Well, maybe not 3 to 5, maybe not 3 years, but like past that. Yeah. So like, the big thing is that games haven't been gone to NFTs yet, right? Like true metaverse style things have not gone into NFTs.
Right.
Right. So you can imagine like Fortnite all of a sudden NFT'd all their inventory of items and have it interoperable across different platforms.
Right. Do you think meme bits are undervalued, or they're correctly valued for now, but in the long run they're undervalued for that reason?
It depends, right? It really depends on if people can build the right utility for them.
Right.
Right. So like I actually have a bunch of Meebits. So I hope they go up.
I think a lot of people do as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually pulled a skeleton too. So that was one of my
That's
my
awesome.
mints. Yeah.
But so you think in 3 to 5 years we see mostly like that digitalization of like metaverse and items and commerce is all happening in the NFT space.
Yep. You know, like the big barriers right now are, one is price and transaction fidelity, right? Because, you know, one, I guess if the price of Ethereum keeps going up, we're just gonna see more expensive NFTs, right? Like the cost to mint an NFT during the peak was crazy. It
Right.
was like 150, $200 just to mint an NFT, right? Then on top of that too, it takes like, you know, 2 to 5 minutes, or I guess like 2 minutes for an NFT to show up in your wallet for transactions to go through, just because of block speed. So you can think about, you know, once Ethereum as like the technology increases a bit more, and then you have faster transaction speed and lower gas fees, right? Then, you know, what happens when it only costs like 5 cents to mint an NFT,
right?
Or to transact an NFT, right? You know, it just decreases that barrier of entry to so many people.
Right. Do you think we'll see in your like 1559 and like POS solve a lot of those issues in your mind?
Yeah, you know, I think that there's a start, right? I think there's just going to be more innovation required,
right?
Especially if you have like more side chains and so on, right?
Yeah, I think the same thing as well. But I think we'll see most of it, you know, still happen on Ethereum.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah. Well, cool. That was,
cool.
You know, I'm not sure if you have to run, but that was, you know, I've enjoyed talking to you today. I think we learned a lot about your mentality. I certainly did. It's really cool to see that your thought process of like getting into the space of like not wanting to start a company, just exploring it, touching it, feeling it, and then seeing areas where you thought something was missing. So I'm glad you've shared that perspective, because I think there's a lot of people who come into this with the reverse of that mentality of where can I start something? And then they go look for it instead of I'm just going to touch and feel.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like it took 4 months between when I got into NFT space to like, oh, we should build a company.
Right.
Right. It wasn't like, you know, there was no obvious answers at the very beginning, but, you know, I'm glad we took our time to actually say, like, okay, this is where, you know, we actually think we can contribute.
Yeah, totally love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope everybody enjoyed this talk with Richard. If you've enjoyed this, follow him on Twitter at Richard. I'll link it below. I will also put this on a podcast. And if you have any other questions, reach out to me and we will get you in touch with him. Richard, thank you so much for spending an hour with us today to talk about yourself and Manifold.
Yeah, pleasure's mine.
All right, buddy.